Hello, welcome back. I am Charles Musgrove with Bean Team and host of Business Matters. We're in studio again today, and we're going to record another show for the Business Matters podcast and radio show. Today, we're going to talk insurance. Insurance is, I guess it's like having a good attorney. You need it when you need it. If you don't even think about it. So, joining us today in studio is Craig McGlynn. Craig, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Craig is a veteran insurance expert. So he is with Brad Burns Insurance Agency, located here in Tallahassee, Florida. Craig, thank you so much. Now tell me, how long have you been in doing this insurance thing?
This is my 30th year.
30th year. Man, you must have started when you were, 2 or 3 years old, because I know you're not even 40 years old.
Right.
So, Craig, I know that we've talked a little bit about this. We're going to talk in depth on the show. We're going to set it up right now. So this is material that we're recording for the podcast and the YouTube channel only. So this is not what's going to be on the radio show. But let's set it up. So we're going to talk about cyber insurance, cyber attacks. That's got to be one of the most, I guess, scary things that people go through right now in businesses is they get hacked and they lose their data,
or they end up with ransomware on there. It's another big problem out there.
Yeah, that's a big problem. We had Ben Graybar in the studio to do a show about cyber attacks, and we during his discussion we landed on having this is a high probability something like this is going to happen to your business. So
yeah, it's not a matter of, it's not a question of when it's or where, if it's going to happen to you, for
right.
sure.
So this is another situation where insurance, if something bad is going to happen, can we get insurance for it? So now the industry has created a cyber insurance. I don't know how long that's been in existence, but
hasn't really been around all that long. As far as insurance policies go, it is one of the newest ones, and because it's new, there is really no standard format to it, and there's really no standard pricing to it.
Great. That's good to know. I mean, insurance, I love you, brother, but man, you probably even don't even like to pay insurance premiums. So
hate paying my insurance.
Man,
premiums.
it's ridiculous. It's but you got to have it. I mean, you can't go naked, as you say. You can't not have insurance.
That's correct.
So you just hope you never use it, and your mod and your experience is low, and you don't have to even talk to your agent other than renewal time. So
for sure.
But cyber insurance is one of those things that I'm glad they have it now. I guess the bad thing is the rates can vary, the coverage can vary. So we'll talk about that more in depth on the show, kind of what to look for. What should the buyer, what should the business owner look for or be aware of when they're shopping for cyber insurance?
Well, when you're doing cyber insurance, all policies are going to cover first-party coverages on it, which, that's damage to you. But you really need to make sure that it also includes coverage for third-party, because if you lose somebody else's social security number or their banking information or payment history, whatever, that type of information, they can sue you, and you need to make sure that you're covered and protected for that coverage.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of things you read about in the paper on Chase and Wells and all those companies that their data has been breached. So
correct.
All that private information is gone. So people are out there. They're abusing that. They're basically extorting the card holder or the member. So that the insurance for that has to be ridiculously expensive.
Well, it's based upon revenues, and obviously the greater your revenues, the more data that you have, the greater the possibility you're going to have a claim.
Right. And then when the insurance companies have to pay off for those breaches, for those situations, that just makes the insurance premiums that you and I pay that we may never use it, or our claim's going to be pretty low. It makes our rates more expensive too.
That is correct.
So one of the other things we're going to talk about today is business interruption. So that's probably pretty closely tied with cyber.
Yeah.
Being in Florida, I would also associate that with the storms and the hurricanes that we have here in Florida.
Yeah, correct. When you're talking business income, it is generally going to be on a property policy, and it's going to have an exclusion for electronic data processing. So you're going to pick up some of the business income from your cyber policy, and then the other portion of it for actual physical damage to your building, you're out of there. That's going to come from your property policy.
Good. So we'll dive into that a bit deeper business interruption, business income coverage, the rates on that, what to look for, what companies do it best, kind of a match of the type of business that fits well with somebody that really needs to have business interruption coverage. And then one of the others other policy types that I want to get into is the EPLI, the Employee Practices Liability Insurance. That in my experience is relatively inexpensive to get, but the coverage on that is pretty phenomenal, and it's almost one of those head scratchers that why would you not get that coverage?
Again, it depends upon the industry that you're in, but if you're in a white collar with low turnover, it is a relatively inexpensive policy to cover you for wrongful hiring, firing, age, race, sex, discrimination. And again, on that one, you want to make sure that you got first party as well as third party.
Right. So we'll get into some other insurance types as well, but those are the three that we're going to tee up for the show. Maybe this may even roll over into two shows. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to bring in the radio audience. So we're going to hear a little bit of music, and then we'll kick right into the recording for the radio audience. And again, that's on Real Talk 93.3 out of Tallahassee, Florida, and we're heard every Sunday at 11:30 a.m. So if you're able to catch it on the radio, listen. If not, check us out on podcast, YouTube. So if you're listening to podcast now, you can go watch it on YouTube if you want to do that also. And look for Bean Team. That is the channel that's on under Business Matters. So, John, tune us up for some music, and let's get the show going.
Welcome to the Business Matters Talk Show with Charles Musgrove. On Business Matters, we discuss the issues that matter to your business. Find more episodes on Apple Podcast, YouTube, and BeanTeam.com. And now here's your host, Charles Musgrove.
Hey, welcome back. I am Charles Musgrove, your host of Business Matters, and we are in studio for another great episode. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have Craig McGlynn in the house, insurance expert with Brad Burns Insurance Agency right here in Tallahassee, Florida. Craig, welcome to the Business Matters Talk Show.
Thank you, my friend.
Man, this is going to be good. Just like all of our other shows, we always have the best experts to bring the knowledge, the nugget knowledge to all of those that are listening. So this show is designed to help the business owner, the business manager run their business better, bring those issues that they want to have more information about it, but it's critical information to run their business successfully. So today the subject is insurance. So we're going to drill down on a few types of insurance. But first of all, Craig, welcome, and tell the audience how long you have been in the insurance industry.
This is my 30th year.
30 years. So you bring a lot of knowledge to us today, and we're glad that you're here because, like I said, all fooling aside, it is. I think we have some of the best experts talking about subject matter that's important to the business and insurance. Everybody needs insurance, and it's people don't like to pay for insurance, but goodness, when they need it, and they recognize a good agent, good coverage. And they know that the agent is good when they have to use it because the coverage is in place and they're taken care of well by the company that the agent represents. So thank you for joining us. And let's, you and I, we talked a little bit in the show before the show about cyber insurance. Mm-hmm. So we all read the stories. We read the headlines about cyber attacks, the banks, the credit cards, they get attacked by the hacks. And then the governments, I've seen recently where a lot of governmental agencies they've gone through the ransomware where they've had to pay large sums of money to get their data back to free up their electronic data. So we had one of our other shows that we had was about cyber attacks and cyber security. So when you have that discussion, and one of the things Ben Graybar talked about was you need to have cyber insurance as well. So give us a little bit of history of how long has cyber insurance even been available, and what is it? What are we looking at that covering and the availability of that?
As I told you earlier, cyber insurance is one of the newcomers to the insurance industry. And because it is so new, there's a variety of different types of coverages. There is no standard form that you're going to find on it. So as a result of it, the price is going to vary dramatically also. But basically, anybody that stores data, uses data in an electronic format needs to consider a policy with cyber coverage on it. It's going to be broken down. All policies are going to cover first party, which is, hey, I want to fix my stuff. So under the first party, you're going to have loss of damage to the actual electronic data that you have. So if it's going to be recovery cost, it's going to be protecting your business, the extra expense that it takes for you to get your business back up and running again. You're also going to have loss of income or extra earnings on there, which is normally going to be excluded under your business interruption policy that you have. You're also going to have cyber extortion losses, if you got to pay ransomware, if you got to do notifications.
So all of that could be covered under the policy.
All under the first party.
So under the first party, let's say the you're an accounting firm, so you lose all of your clients' accounting data,
or somebody ends up with all of your Social Security numbers.
Right. So I was going to take the not so bad situation to start with. So if it just gets zapped and it's gone.
Right.
So you're covered for the cost to try to recover that or to rebuild that data?
Correct, including forensic experts coming in and trying to rebuild your database.
So that would include the hardware. So if it damages any of the hardware associated with that attack, then that's covered as well.
Correct, hardware, software. Some policies will actually pay for an upgrade to your hardware.
So if, like a lot of policies, there's a limit.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a limit on the coverage for that? Because I can see the cost on that just getting like exorbitant.
Yeah, normally a policy like this is going to start off with $1 million limit on it, and it's going to be divided up into some sub-limits inside of there.
Okay, so that's kind of the threshold we're looking at. We're talking millions, not 100,000.
No.
Okay, good. So, all right, so my scenario was kind of the innocent where your data is destroyed or
right.
It's somehow lost, but it's not out into the ether where people can get it.
Right. So under that scenario, they're going to pay for you to get your equipment back. They're going to pay for you to get your software back. They're also going to pay for the extra expense. Your people are going to have to be coming in, working extra hours to try and rebuild the database that you have. All of that's going to be contemplated under the first-party coverage.
Okay, so that does not even get into if my employees are working on rebuilding, we're not earning money.
Correct.
So it's going to cover the cost of those employees, not the extra cost of income.
It will actually cover the extra costs of, hey, I can't operate because I'm out of business right now. So, yes, you are picking up your business income under this also.
Okay, so the cyber does have a component of business interruption or business loss
Correct.
coverage. Okay, perfect. So what else are we looking for in the coverage under that policy?
So on the first party, going with my worst case scenario where you've lost people's Social Security numbers. There's notification costs that you have to do. There's processes that you have to go through as far as saying, hey, look, I'm sorry, we've had a hack. You've got to be notified. There's generally going to be some sort of, hey, I got to do credit monitoring for these people for the next year, 2 years. All of that is contemplated under there also. In addition, you're going to have damage to your reputation because even though innocently I didn't do anything.
How do you determine the cost for that or what the coverage for that?
Well, like I said, it's all going to be under the $1 million, but there's going to be sub-limits, or you can, if your reputation has been damaged to the point where, hey, I'm losing clientele, it's pretty easy to point to it and say, look, I've lost this. I need to hire a PR firm. I need to do some advertising. It's also known as, crisis management at that time.
Are there that leads me to the question of this has a lot of elements to it if you're hacked.
Correct.
And to try to recover from that hack. So are there companies out there? Is it a component of what service the insurance companies provide, or are there companies out there that provide this kind of recovery assistance where they walk you through this process?
Most of the companies actually have specialized claims departments that deal with, hey, you need this expert to come in and manage your reputation at this point.
So the insurance company, they know what needs to be done. However, they're not providing that service. They're not holding your hand to the point of they come in and help you do it.
Well, your claims adjuster is going to say, hey, you probably are going to have the following losses. And we have conditions and processes in place to help you recover as rapidly as humanly possible. Because, the quicker they get you back up on your feet, the less the actual expense is going to be.
Right. Because you have that whole time that you're down and recovering, your business interruption is covering that.
Right.
Or is that what the period of time that the business interruption covers is a measured period of time from start to beginning of when you're hacked to when you're back up running?
It's going to be based upon what your actual loss sustained is.
Okay. So
during that time period, not to exceed the policy limit.
So you do kind of a comparison of this is what we were doing before, this
Correct.
is what happens after. We're not back up until
Correct.
Whatever that time period it takes.
That is correct.
Okay, so all of that is first party.
All right. Third party, you're looking at things like network security liability. Somebody sues you because they say that I didn't have adequate security on my system, so that's why their data was lost. You're also going to have network privacy policies, which is similar to that, but that involves more along the lines of, hey, did I have a firewall in place? Did I have, industry standard stuff? You're also going to have electronic media liability on there. So if you have defamation of character, slander, libel, that's covered on there also. And if your business is actually, hey, I'm a technology firm, you can also pick up your errors and omissions liability insurance under third-party coverage.
So that would the E&O coverage, is that separate or is that wrapped up in the cyber policy?
It depends on if your business is to be a technology business.
Right.
If you're a technology business, then yes, you purchase the errors and omissions policy through there. That way you avoid having to purchase two separate policies.
Okay. So the third-party coverage would be, let's say that Social Security number, credit card information is hacked and it causes financial damage to that person, the card holder.
Correct.
So that coverage would cover that situation?
Correct.
Okay.
So as you have expenses coming in, hey, somebody accessed my bank records as a result of the data breach that you had, it's going to make me whole through there. It's also going to set me up where I've got credit monitoring done on my stuff so that it doesn't happen in the future, and they're going to expect all of that from you in the event of a breach.
Right. What are the is this coverage offered by a lot of different companies, or is it a limited number of companies that's offering this?
There's companies that specialize in cyber coverage only, meaning that's the only policy that they write. Though I'm seeing more and more of the standard carriers are starting to include limited cyber as part of a package policy, a business owner's policy.
Okay, so let's tell us how and you may have touched on this, but tell us how what would we look for as a shopper of this cyber insurance? What are we looking for in the premium cost?
It depends 100% on what your revenues are. The premium basis is based upon what the revenues that are generated from your company. So they're going to do, if you're earning less than $1 million, you're probably looking $1,000 range as far as the cost of the cyber coverage.
So that total coverage annual policy is $1,000, and that's if you had a less than $1 million. So is it bracketed into less than $1 million, and then $1 million to $3 million?
$1 million to $3 million, and then over $3 million.
Okay, so if you're in the $1 million to $3 million, is that going to be roughly double, $2,000?
About $3,000
up
by
to
the time.
$3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is not cost prohibitive if you're comparing that to workers' comp, and if you're a white collar, it's comparable,
right.
Close to what a workers' comp coverage is going to be.
It's relatively inexpensive coverage, yeah.
Right. So that's a little surprising to me. So would you get cyber, would it ever be wrapped into your business owner's policy or your package insurance also? Yeah,
a number of carriers have started including it in your BOP policy, but it's not going to be at the $1 million limit of a standalone policy. It's generally going to be lower limits, $50,000, just like I've seen more and more carriers as far as employment practices liability insurance, they include a small amount on their policy, which they used to never have.
Okay, so let's clarify that. So BOP, you use and that's BOP, business owner's policy.
Correct.
So let's clarify that, because I think that's an important distinction. You said that a lot of carriers in their BOP policies, or the BOPs, they're including some low-level cyber coverage.
That is correct.
However, that sounds like that's not something that you would recommend.
You can't increase it to the limits that you really need to have. I mean, it's more of an add-on at that point in time. Under a BOP, you get a lot of little coverages, ancillary coverages on top of the general liability and the contents and the business, the building coverage. So they'll generally add things on like employee dishonesty up to $25,000. They'll add on cyber liability up to $50,000. They'll add on employment practices liability up to $50,000.
All right, so all the business owners out there with those coverage amounts, they're saying that's not enough.
Yeah.
I mean that's insulting almost to have that included, and to say that, well, you've got coverage for cyber, you got your EPLI coverage at those low limits. So if you are the good agents out there, they're going to recommend, okay, we need to talk about cyber insurance. We need to talk about these other insurable risks that need to be a separate policy from your package or your BOP.
Correct.
So you're recommending let's talk about the industries that you would not look at cyber insurance.
If you have predominantly blue or gray collar that don't deal with data a lot, I mean, other than their phone, basic text, email sort of stuff, you probably don't need to worry about that too much. But if your business is dependent upon electronic data, or you deal with Social Security numbers, or you deal with other people's information, you really need to have a cyber policy.
So if you are, let's just draw a couple of opposites. So if you're a roofing company and all of your data is hosted by another either accounting firm or some other an Amazon, it's out there that it's being hosted, and you don't have any Social Security numbers, your payroll is being prepared by ADP or some other processor, so you have very limited data that you could do without.
Correct.
You can always retrieve it. There's another company that you can point to that they're going to be responsible for that.
Yeah, you probably should make sure that third party is carrying cyber insurance. Exactly.
So that's going to be a downstream risk that you can make sure that they're covering that. So that company, you could probably say, okay, there may be enough coverage in our BOP that we've mitigated any risk. So
correct.
Let's put them on one extreme, and then let's look at a law firm on the other extreme.
Well, actually, let's look at like a doctor's office instead. So you have, under the HIPAA laws, there's all kinds of compliance that they have to have, including, making sure that the data is safe at all points in time. So a doctor's office most definitely should have a cyber policy.
Good. That's funny you said that. I went to, it didn't happen with my doctor, but I took my pets to the vet a couple of weeks ago, and they were writing all the stuff down on paper, and I'm like, can you look up the medical records of my dogs? And they had been hacked, or they lost all their data.
Crazy.
So they were doing everything the long way, and they'd been without their computers for almost 2 weeks. So I waited a few days and called back and said, okay, do you have your stuff back yet? They had the medical records back online, so everything was somehow restored. So I don't know if that was a hack or they just had a bad computer system, but anyway, it can cause a big damage to an ongoing business.
Well, you could have a rogue employee that
exactly
dissatisfied that can dump your database on you.
Yeah.
So, anybody that, like I said, is dependent upon their data in electronic format should consider a cyber policy.
Okay, so we have established, that most companies, or a lot of companies, all companies should evaluate is the cyber coverage in their BOP, their standard package policy enough, or do they need to have a standalone policy for cyber coverage?
Correct.
So let's transition from cyber to business interruption. I know we talked about business interruption being included as part of the cyber policy, but you can also have a business interruption policy separate from the cyber policy.
Well, the reason that the cyber policy includes business interruption is because there's an exclusion for electronic data on your standard property policy. So in order for a business interruption policy, or business income and extra expense is how it's normally referred to, in order for it to trigger, it's got to be a covered peril causing damage to your building. So when we had a storm come through...
Does that mean you have to own your building?
No, it doesn't mean that you have to own the building, but there has to be actual damage by a covered peril to the building in order for it to trigger. The example I was going to give you is you get a restaurant here in town that, hey, the power's out for 7 days. They haven't experienced any they haven't had any damage to their actual building, right. So their business income does not respond to it unless you've got an endorsement on the policy for off-premises power interruption, which there's a few carriers who are offering that out there. And if you live in Tallahassee and you're concerned about being out of business for more than 3 days, you probably ought to look at, hey, does my policy cover this off-premises business interruption?
Yeah, you need to have that. So you could have, that's a business, the restaurant, you use that as an example. So that's a business that is based on having a facility. What if you're a service business that you can operate in a virtual setting, but you lose power or you lose internet? Could you have a business interruption policy to cover those situations?
I don't know if the internet is going to be covered on there. Frankly, the off-premises power interruption, yes, if you've lost power, you will still be covered by that policy.
Okay. So is that the same situation as your cyber, that certain businesses really need to look at business interruption as a separate policy?
Well, okay. So the BOP policy that we referred to before, which a BOP is going to cover your general liability and it's going to cover your property. That's the two main things it's designed to do. But on a BOP policy, you actually get excellent coverage as far as your business interruption goes, because it's 12 months actual loss sustained, including extra expense, including ordinary income. If you are not a Main Street business or you're not a professional business, so you're not eligible for a BOP policy, then you've got to try and package it onto your property policy. And it's actually considered to be included in the total insured value that you have for your property. So that's where you're going to pick that up. And then it's a question of how many months do I want to cover myself for business interruption? And normally it's going to be paid out. There's going to be a 72-hour period of restoration, which is basically a deductible of days. And then after that, it's going to start paying up to whatever your selected amount is. But it's normally going to be doled out 25% for installments.
Okay, so again, that payment is going to be based on when you compare what you had done historically versus what you're getting now, either nothing or some lesser amount.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so if I understood that correctly, your best coverage and the best payout is if you can get that wrapped into your BOP for the business interruption.
Yeah, because that's going to be 12 months actual loss sustained, which is going to be the broadest coverage that you're going to get on business income.
And my guess is that's going to be the most economical premium as well.
Absolutely.
So that's different than the cyber policy, where we're going to probably look at a separate coverage for that outside of the BOP.
Correct.
Okay, that's good information. So that's some really good information. So we have, I guess that really draws the importance of, like most of our professions and most of the experts that we brought in here, it really is important that the business owner, they're working with an agent who understands their business. They understand the right coverage that they need to match that with. So, Craig, I think that's some valuable information that we've learned today on cyber insurance, business interruption. We did not get into the employee practices liability insurance, but we're going to come back for another episode on that. So I want you to stick around for episode number 2 that we're going to do. So all of you out there listening, join us next week at 11:30 on Real Talk 93.3. I am Charles Musgrove, your host of Business Matters. Thank you so much for joining us. I want you to have a great day, a blessed week. One more time, I want to shout out to Craig McGlynn. Thank you so much with the Brad Burns Insurance Agency.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day. Have a blessed week. Peace.
The Business Matters Talk Show with Charles Musgrove is sponsored by the Bean Team. For all your business accounting and tax preparation needs, visit beanteam.com or call 893-7710. You can listen to more episodes of Business Matters on Apple Podcast, YouTube, or visit beanteam.com.